Well, again, good morning. It is so great to see you and so good to have you with us. And just pray that what we offer today is going to really be a blessing to you. I'm a little excited about this. This is one of my all-time favorite stories, but I get to retell it today in a way that it's never been told before, at least a way that I've never told it before. I just really am excited about what this is going to be. So we're going to finish our teaching series today, last part of Seeking and Saving. What does that look like? We've been going through some of the old familiar texts, old familiar stories, kind of seeing it from a different spin, seeing how it ties to the Lord's declaration that I have come to seek and to save the lost. That's what it was all about, right? And that was the intent of his entire mission, his ministry. Everything was about that. And we've been tying all of these stories to that to show us exactly how that looks. Well, this story today is of no difference. It's going to be there. It's, again, one of my personal favorites because it's a story, while it's been preached time and time again, there's still a message here. There's an amazing message here. And as we consider the mission to seek and to save, we immediately have to go to the very first words that happen to be the title of the sermon, had to. Had to. Verse 4, he had to travel through Samaria. This points toward purpose. There was a reason that he was going to go. This points toward intent. In other words, there's something I need to take care of. All right? And when we typically have that mindset, right, there's something I need to take care of, what do we say? I have to, whatever, or why did you do that? Well, I had to. We have that proclamation. That's how we understand. That's what we find the basis of how this story begins. It tells us that he had to go. So that immediately ties this story to seek and save, right? Because if he's come to seek and save, he had to encounter people. He had to go here, had to go there. We see how that comes together. So what we find is those words are no longer just words, they're intentional actions. And that's what changes things when we begin to understand the relational value of knowing Christ. He's coming through in different ways because he had to find you. He's coming through different methods because he had to seek you. He wanted to save you. I mean, we see how all this ties together, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. So what we find here, and I told you I was going to point out two things in the very first verse. It says he had to travel through Samaria. Now that word's important. Why? Because that indicates I'm not going to be there long. I've just got a mission. I just got to go through. You ever said I got to go through town? And you're not there for very long. You're not going to stay. You're not going to buy a house. You're just going through, right? I went through wherever. Here he's going through Samaria. So not pointing to a long stay, but it points us to a mission. It points us to an assignment, if you will, an appointment. Again, a reason that he had to. In other words, there was something or someone there that he needed to see. What we find in these great accounts is there's always a reason, and it's always for a greater purpose. It's never just for show. There's always something bigger than just the initial encounter. There's something bigger than just that one moment, right? Because if we single it down to just a single incident, okay. But when that begins to open the door for something else, when that begins to change lives, communities, whatever, then we begin to see, wait a minute. If that hadn't happened, this wouldn't have happened. Then we begin to see how this spiral and domino effect takes place. So there's always a reason. It's never just a one-off. It opens doors to something larger. So we go to our geographic area here, Samaria. This is a place that is not seen in the greatest light of others, right? They're not looked at favorably by the others. But here's the thing. They needed to hear about Jesus too, right? Remember when we did the series through Jonah and the Lord told Jonah to go and see Nineveh. Well, I don't like them. I don't care about them. Samaria was not seen in the greatest light by the people of the Jewish people. They just weren't. They didn't like them. They looked down on them. They had names for them. There was a culture clash, racial clash, societal, whatever. It's all there. So what we find in that, understanding that, they needed to hear about Jesus, but the disciples didn't have a voice there. The disciples did not have a voice there, and others may not have seen the need for their salvation. Others possibly very well didn't care right? Because I don't like them. If we don't look favorably upon someone or something, what's our attitude about it? Who cares? But somebody does. Somebody does. You know, whether it's the wake of someone's death, whether it's a tragedy, well, it didn't affect me, but it affected somebody. It hurt someone. Maybe that person's grieving. Maybe you don't care about that person that passed away, but someone did. They had a family. Maybe they had moms or dads or sisters or children or what. We see all these different things. And so what we need to find is in this, while Samaria may not have been looked at favorably by other people in their region, Jesus said they still need to hear the truth. And who better to reach them than one of their own? Think about that, right? A stranger comes in, you typically say, I don't want to hear about it. Then what do you know? But somebody that you know, somebody that you maybe have some connection with or some experience to, like, okay, I'll listen to you because I know who you are. So I'll at least give you an audience. You know, I may not believe you. You may not affect any change, but I'll at least give you an audience where if, you know, Tom, Bob, or Harry comes in, I don't want to hear him. What does he know? How many of us have ever had that attitude towards something, you know? Listening to some guy talking, what does he know? I've done that. You know, I've done that. And again, well, guilt or not guilt, that's just the truth. I remember one time we were at a pastor's meeting, some kind of thing, and they had this 20-year-old kid up there telling all of us what to do. I'll be the first one to tell you, I didn't listen to a word he said. You know, and I was probably not right for that because I had a bad attitude about it because I'm like, what the heck does this guy know? He can't even spell life. Okay, but so we do that, right? But here, the Lord needed them to hear the message. They didn't have a voice from the disciples because they were the Jews. They weren't going to go talk to them. They weren't going to listen to them. They didn't know Jesus. They'd only heard about him, but they had never been introduced to him. As we'll see through the woman at the well, how that is a true statement. So we find our main character in the story, one of their own. But wait a minute, Pastor. She's got issues. I mean, she don't have everything all in order. I mean, she's been divorced. I mean, what? That's exactly why she's such an important part of this story, because she's real. She's relatable. She's one of their own. She's broken and battered and looking just like everybody else. That's what makes this story so important. It's not about the what I did, it's what I am. Okay? That's what changes everything. Because when something is real, then you can relate to it. You know, if someone comes across as pompous or pious or way above you, you don't get that. Because the immediate response is, you have no idea how I feel. You have no idea what I've been going through. That's why it becomes difficult sometimes during election season when you have some of these people that are telling you, oh, I know how hard it is to pay your light bill. No, you don't. You know, and so we don't relate to that. You know, that's why I always caution people, never tell somebody I know how you feel unless you really do. Because that sometimes can be a relationship breaker. All right. So Jesus knew what needed to be done to reach these people. And that's the reason she's such a part of this story. She's relatable. Then we go back to the words had to. All right. Had to. These words point us to the purpose of the story. So we read on and we see that Jesus is worn out from his journey. And he is sat down at the well. That also speaks to relatability. Okay? Think about this for a minute. Jesus here is saying he's worn out. Okay? It's hot. I've been walking. I'm tired. It's exhausting. I'm trying to help others. I'm trying to encourage others. I just need to sit down and rest for a minute. Wait a minute. That kind of sounds like life. Do you see how when we begin to understand the personal nature of the stories that we're given within the confines of Scripture, that once we become relatable, not only to the characters, but to the Lord himself, we're like, wait a minute, this actually is speaking to me. Because, okay, I don't know if any of you have known, but this week has kind of like been hot. And so if you spend any time outside at all, you were probably worn out and needed to sit down. You know, you might not have found a well to sit by, but you need to sit down somewhere and find some water or something to kind of keep you going. So this speaks to reality. This speaks to, again, relatability. So that's exactly the point. And so when we read it only as just a Bible story, you may miss that. But when we begin to, wait a minute, this is talking to me, because now it makes sense. Now we're dealing with someone that I can relate to because, hey, I've had some problems in life too. We're also speaking about someone that is saying, it's okay to sit down and rest for every now and then, because sometimes you need to. You know, you can only push yourself so far. You got to sit down and rest sometimes. So here what we find is Jesus is oftentimes presented, and again, and forgive me, I don't mean this in any wrong way, but sometimes Jesus is oftentimes presented in an over-spiritualized or over-religiousized way, but that was never his desire. He wanted to be relatable. He wanted us to be able to come to me, follow me. These are all personal things. He wants to be relatable. And so he wants us to see through his example, through the reality of life, we can do this. We can do this. So we find him sitting at the well, and we read of this woman of Samaria. Now, that is a distinct description, all right? Because we have directly, clearly pointed out a woman. So we know what we're dealing with there. We don't give her name. We don't have her name. But we're specifically dealing with a woman. So she's been identified clearly as the person of that particular gender. And Samaria. So we know what she is and where she's from. All right? That's the beauty of this. And it's important because while we're not given direct things like names and stuff, it doesn't just say a person, it doesn't just say someone or a generic situation, but a woman of Samaria. So we have a specific person from a specific location, which also happens to be where he had to go. See how it's all tying together? That first little word there in verse 4, it makes the whole story. Because without those two words, none of the rest of it won't work. So everything is building to the point. So this is where he had to go. And this leads us to the point of seeking and saving is without a question, the center point of this story. What do I mean? Meeting people where they are. Because that is one of the most important factors that I've learned. And I would even say more so in the latter years of my work, because, and you've heard me say it, maybe even ad nauseum, because it's just true. Life is real. And until we determine that and don't see it from a spectator lens of, well, how could this or how... Scripture says, but for the grace of God go I. That could happen to me too. I'm not exempt. Nobody's exempt. Okay? It's not about death or this or that. No, it's about wealth. No, it's just real. And so what we find is Jesus showing something relatable in this story. And I love how this plays out. So meeting people where they are. So we read in verse 7, she came to draw water. This was the purpose of her visit. This is exactly why she was coming. Nothing else. This is where she was going. This was the reason she came to the well. Okay, well, we can look at that in a couple of different ways. All right, we can see, okay, that is her daily task. That's what she has to go do for multiple purposes, whether it's delivering it to someone, if it's cooking, if it's washing, whatever. But I want you to think about this, all right? Not only was that the purpose maybe of her visit, but it also speaks to daily life. In other words, the continual pattern of, this is what I do. Think about this for a minute, friends. Think about this for just a minute. What we find when we think about this is what I do. How many people are in that place? Think about this for a minute. Not only did she bring a water jar with her to carry water, she also brought brokenness with her every day. She carried it with her everywhere that she went. It becomes commonality. It becomes commonplace. This is what I do. This is where it's at. You just come to accept it, and you continue to carry it with you everywhere you go. It becomes your story, it becomes your identity, it becomes everything that consumes you because you can't see beyond it. It's just there. That's who I am, that's what I am. I'll never be anything else. It's a trap. All right, so this is what she's carrying with her. How many people does that describe? How many people just do daily life and get accustomed to things and possibly just grow numb? It's just where it's at. Nothing's ever going to get better. Nothing's ever going to improve. It's just where I'm at. Okay. So we can almost see the deadness to a degree, the numbness to a degree of just, you walk to the thing, get the water, and go back. There's nothing there. That makes sense. We find so many people in that very thing, that daily routine, walking back and forth, and eventually not even know why. Somebody may ask that question, why do you do that? I don't know. It's just what I've always done. You've just lost all sense of purpose, all sense of direction. Jesus said, give me a drink, as she's coming to the well, as she's approaching the well. She's there, and she's there to draw, right? So this wasn't an unusual request in one sense, but let's look at this. Was that a demand? Give me a drink? Or was that a conversation starter? Think about it for a minute, because what we find is the answer is in her reply. Because she said, how is it? Now, just those words alone, just those three words alone, tell us that typically, most likely, she would not have spoken to this stranger. Okay? She wouldn't have spoken to this stranger for a couple of different reasons. And more than likely, he probably wouldn't have spoken to her if it were a normal situation. But we have to remember, he had to go. All right? So look at it this way. If we understand the rest of what she said, how is it that you, so she's specifically talking to him, she said, how is it that you, a Jew, okay, now again, are we talking about features? Are we talking about ethnicity? Are we talking about the manner of dress? But something made it clear that that's what he was, all right? So again, we're not being improper. She said, how is it that you, a Jew, ask me for a drink? That's direct, because what was she referring to herself as me? A Samaritan woman. Why would you talk to me? I mean, that's not right. That's not normal. We're not supposed to do this. The Jews don't like us. I mean, men don't speak to strange women. Somebody might say something. We might get in trouble. I mean, this list could go on and on and on about all the things that may have been filling her mind as she wonders, why is this man speaking to me, much less asking me for a drink of water? What is going on here at this moment? If we only see the surface, we see a slightly awkward meeting, right? If we only look at the surface, like, this is weird. She really don't know why he's talking to her, and he probably shouldn't be talking to her. And this is just kind of awkward. This is just kind of weird, right? I don't know all the modern terminology from the young people, but there's some kind of word about something being weird. I don't know what it is, but I don't want to know right this minute. I'm sure I got translators out there on both sides. But at this moment, again, if we want to look at the surface, we're just seeing a slightly awkward meeting. But if we understand seeking and saving, we see so much more, because what we find is Jesus asking her for a drink opens a door for a conversation. Okay? That's what you're here for anyhow. I need one. Hey, let's talk about it, right? What's beautiful about this is it wasn't time to talk about her issues. We don't see that beginning the conversation. Had she walked up and sat down and said, hey, I need to tell you about what you got going on in your life and how... she would have turned around and went the other way, like really, really fast. Either really creeped out, how do you know that? Or that's none of your business. But that's not what happened. He talked to her about something they had in common. Water. They needed to share this moment together to get to the other place. See, that's why I've been talking about through this series, how we say something and why we say something and the manner we say something absolutely matters. Because it either opens doors or it completely closes them. That's very, very true. So what we find is this was not time to talk about her issues. So there needed to be a point. There needed to be something that was relatable. She had come to draw from the well. He was thirsty, so let's talk about water. All right, that's pretty interesting, right? That would work because that's an icebreaker. That's something that gets something going. It was a point of interest. It was clearly something they had in common. Seeking requires the willingness to look. Think about that. If I am looking for something, I have to be willing to go look for it. Think about that. How many times people say, well, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. But have you even gotten up? Have you even tried? Have you looked under the couch cushion? Have you pulled? I mean, what? That's the thing. Seeking requires a willingness to look. But looking is the willingness to realize it might be under something. That's what we are finding in this beautiful story. There was more. There was something under her. There was something in her that needed to be dealt with. There was something going on in her life that needed to be addressed, but not in a condemning and throw you out kind of way, but a healing. When something is broken, what do we look for? We look for ways to repair it, right? You know, the only time that it's not is when it's beyond repair, when it's been crushed and just it has no ability to be fixed. But we don't give up on things so quickly when it's someone else. So when we understand that something may be under something or behind something, in other words, it's not always obvious. You know, I saw this shirt back, I guess it was back when it was cooler, when people were wearing sweatshirts and hoodies and whatever, and the guy was marketing these, and it was made to wear with the wording on the back, and it said, "You have no idea what may be going on in the life of the person in front of you." It was a conversation starter, and that's true. We don't know. Okay, we can look at a lot of surface stuff and make a lot of assumptions about this or that. You must be this, you must be having a hard time, or you must be having a great day. We could assume all kinds of different stuff, but smiles can hide a whole lot of things too. You know, how many times does somebody ever come and say, "How you doing?" "Oh, I'm doing great," knowing the whole time you're lying, because inside you are completely a train wreck. It's just true, right? So here what we're finding is Jesus was seeking and saving, right? That was his whole thing. That was his whole mission. So what we look at here is it's not always obvious. So what she carried internally at this point was absolutely heavier than the clay pot she brought to bring the water in. All right? What she was carrying with her was something completely different. It was something that no one else saw except for her, or at least she thought so. And this is the beauty of coming and introducing and being introduced to Jesus. Jesus met her where she was, because that's exactly where she could be fixed. That's exactly where she could be rescued. Nowhere else. Nowhere else, right? Because that was not only the right time, the right place, the right everything. That was where she could be reached. Let me tell you something today, friends. That has not changed. He can meet you where you are. Don't matter what you're going through. It could be family problems, health problems, financial problems, emotional problems, spiritual problems. Because I'm telling you, questions are a good thing. And we need to ask more, because that's how we grow. That's how we get there. Don't just take things for surface value. Look deeper. You know, you've heard my water analogy many times. Don't look at the surface, look underneath. That's where you find life. That's where you find incredible things. You know, it's beautiful. I had a friend of mine used to teach scuba diving in the lake, the dark water, right? And he'd tell these kids as they're learning to navigate and learn their very, very minimal visual range of maybe 8 to 10 inches. And he said, everything's great, just look around, unless you see red eyes. And they didn't know what he was talking about. Of course, that was an alligator, but that's a whole different story. But Jesus met her where she was, and he still does that to us. So in her confusion as to why would you ask me for a drink? Why would you not in a bad way was she saying this, but she was confused. Like, why? Because typically you're not supposed to talk to me. We have no relation here at all. Jesus responded and he said, if you knew, which absolutely tells us and indicates she did not. Okay, think about this. But who does she represent? The greater picture, Samaria, which is where he had to go. We see all this is starting to paint a picture here. It's such an incredible thing. I love this. So if you knew, but she didn't, but what is his mission? Seek and save. If you knew the gift of God, what is the gift of God? Eternal life, right? If you knew the gift of God, and who is saying to you, he's speaking of himself, the true messenger of the gift, give me a drink. In other words, me. If you knew who you were talking to, that's what he's saying to her. If you had any idea who you're talking to, you would ask him, the gift of God, and he would give you living water. Man, whew, what a moment. What a moment. She has no idea what he's talking about. Zero. Right? Zero. Because none of this made any sense because she's only looking at the literal issue of the water. And she said, man, you don't even have a bucket. How could you possibly give me anything? How many times do we try to present something and we don't even have a bucket? Someone said, I don't know, what are you talking about? Lost and this, that. I have no idea. Meet them where they are. That's what matters. You know, it was all over the place, of course, this week, and it's a long, long story, but I saw an interview. It was from probably a couple months ago, but, of course, the big athlete, celebrity, whatever, Hulk Hogan died this week, all right? So that was it was all over the thing, whatever. A lot of people had a lot of stuff. But what I found was very, very interesting. He was talking with his pastor, and they were recording it for different purposes and everything. But what I found was so interesting what he said. He said, you know, I've been all over the world, and I'm, probably one of the most known faces on the planet, regardless of whether you like wrestling or not. But he said, when I met Jesus, I finally found something that was real. He said, everything I've ever done in my life was all made up. It wasn't real. Not only the acting and the entertaining and but he said it wasn't real because it wasn't based on reality. It was based on illusion and entertainment. But he said, I met Jesus, and it got real. Those words spoke to me, because that's what we're finding here. She had no idea what he was talking about. If you knew, you would ask me. And she had no idea because she was only looking at the issue on the table with the water. And so she said, you don't even have a bucket. In other words, how could you possibly give me anything? Again, she wasn't being disrespectful. She was being real. Do we see what's happening here, though? All of this stems from his first words, give me a drink. All right, because give me a drink. This statement, this question comes from the fact he had to go to Samaria. Why? Was that the only route? Was that the only way to get where he was going? No. He needed to see her because ultimately she would be the one to reach Samaria with the good news. You see, this conversation doesn't happen if he doesn't go. This conversation doesn't happen if he begins with her issues, if he begins with her situation in life. So he talked about water, a common denominator. That is still a wonderful lesson right now. Meet somebody where they are. You may not understand it. You may not agree. That's okay. That's okay. I have people come to me and ask me about stuff all the time that I don't agree with. And it's not an argumentative fashion. I don't understand it. I can't meet you there because I have no idea. I don't understand it. But let's talk about it. How did you get there? What brought that revelation about? Where are you at? That's how you have a conversation. That's how you get somewhere. That's where healing begins. And that's what the beauty of this. So we see now what's happening here. They're talking. Now they're talking. It's not awkward anymore. Now we're having a conversation. You said this, I said that. Why? What does this mean? Talking led to what? Questions. Questions lead to what? Answers. Answers lead to peace. Peace leads to change lives. That's how it all works. But it's all the willingness to even start. It's all the willingness to even start. If we shut down that, nothing ever happens. No negotiations happen, no deals are made, nothing happens, no lives are healed, no relationships are healed, nothing. Over, done. I was talking to someone just last night by text, a friend of mine that is going through a marital situation, and said that, unfortunately, they're separated, this and that, said they hadn't spoken to each other in 6 months. You can't fix that if you're not willing to talk. And it may still not be fixable. I don't know. I don't know the whole entire, but you got to be willing to put something on the table and talk. And if you can't get past that, it stays at stalemate, and nobody wins that. Nobody wins, and everything continues to do what? Stay at odds. And everybody's at war. And then we begin to just see chaos and upheaval, and nothing ever comes good of that. So Jesus said, everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again. Now, he's speaking to both the physical and the spiritual. Thirst, naturally, we all know, is only quenched for so long. And then what do you need? More. That's just how this body works. Spiritually, he was also teaching that flesh is the same way. In other words, what you're looking for on the road that you're traveling, you will never find. You will never find. And therefore, because of that, you will look for more and you will try to quench it, but less and less will the satisfaction be. The more you try, the less it works. But that keeps you going. And so the search becomes endless. The search becomes fruitless. I'm trying anything to fulfill this, but it won't work. However, this is what he said. He said, however, friends, let me tell you something. There's always an alternative. Okay? Everything looks bleak. Everything looks dark. Everything looks endless. There's always an alternative. There's always an answer. And he said, however, what I offer you, the water that I give, the living water, if you take of that, you will never thirst again. Now, wait a minute. Never? That's a huge claim. That's a big claim. Never. How many of us have said, I'm never going to do something only to, like 5 minutes later, do it? All right? But he said, if you drink of what I'm offering you, if you take of the water that I'm offering, you will never thirst again. What does a statement like that do? It keeps the conversation going. What do you mean? I don't understand that. Now there's opportunity to talk more. Now that door's opening a little bit wider to let's talk about more. You see how the beauty of this rolls? You see friends, Jesus is the master teacher, okay? Not only in the material, but in how you present it. This is so incredible because it keeps the conversation going. So now we still have not gotten to her struggles. We have still not gotten to her woes in life at all. But he's leading her to a place where he can share the answer with her when it's time. There's a proper time for everything. And seeking and saving, these are processes. This is getting there. This is effective still right now. There's times that we meet people and we have a great concern about them, and maybe whether it's their eternal well-being or just a peace in their life or what with their spiritual walk. But sometimes that first meeting, sometimes that second meeting, sometimes that year left down the road meeting is still not time. They're not ready to receive. The scripture talks about soil and it being proper soil, whether some take it and some don't, and some's rocky and some don't. There's a time to sow those seed, all right? So this is still effective right now. The you're this and you're that and you're never going to make it and you're going to hell, that doesn't make the conversation continue. That shuts the conversation down, all right? That's the beautiful part of this lesson. You have to get to the place. You have to arrive at the location, and that takes time. If any of us leave here today to go to wherever, it doesn't matter where it is, Raleigh, Miami, what does it take? Time to get there. Whether you fly or drive or walk or ride the bicycle, it doesn't matter. One takes longer than the other, but it still takes time. Whether it's 20 minutes or 20 hours, it still takes time. Relationships are the same thing. They don't just happen overnight. Not longevity, not healthy, okay? This takes time. Jesus is taking time to talk to her. He's asking the right questions to continue the conversation. And so again, he's the master teacher, not only just in materials, but in how to do it. She's still engaged. She's still talking. He's not lost her yet. She began with apprehension. Why would you ask me for a drink? But now she wants to know more. What is this living water? I'm interested in that. I want to know more about that. Isn't that beautiful? You know, that's the whole way that this thing works. And she responds to his comment, never thirst again. And she said, sir. Now, interestingly enough, that word caught my eye because in the last several accounts that we've looked at, when people encountered Jesus, what did they say? They said, Lord. But what did he say to her? If you knew. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know. She had not encountered him because Samaria had not yet been met. All right, it's all beginning to make sense now when we begin to see what she said. Sir, give me this water. So at this point, again, she has no idea who she's talking to. She said, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and come here to draw. What was she saying? I'm tired of this routine. It's not satisfying. What I'm doing is not working because I always have to keep coming back to get more. I always have to keep looking for ways, and it always runs out. There's so much in that thought, both physical and spiritual, because what a powerful lesson that she's learning, and she don't even know it yet. That's so cool, all right? Because what we find here is he was telling her that all along. This well that you keep drawing from, it's never going to quench your thirst, ever. She's only looking at Jacob's well. She's like, honey, what are you greater than me? She's confused. But he was talking to her about something so much deeper. She said, give me this water. Give me this water. So what is happening now? The door is open to share. Because if I'm asking you to give me something, you're going to tell me or show me how you give it to me, right? There's going to be maybe not even an explanation, but there's going to be at least a demonstration. It's going to happen. So I'm asking, so now the door is open. In other words, show me what is needed. Show me what I have to do to have this water that you're talking about, which allows for the conversation to continue and allows the doors to open to move into what is in the way of you receiving this water. Because there's obviously, if I don't have it, something is keeping me from it. If you've got knowledge of it and I don't, then that means there's something I don't know that you know. I want to know what it is. So the conversation continues and the conversation is open. The master teacher, once again, he's teaching. I would say this today from a pulpit standpoint, from a lectern standpoint, from a classroom standpoint, so many would be in a much healthier place if they would just see things through the eyes of Jesus. Because the way he's laying this out, friends, is exactly how he wants us to do it. Meet people where they are. Okay? Show them him through you. Sometimes that might not be words. Okay? So what we find is he told her, he said, go call your husband. Because she's asking, she said, how can I have this water? I want this water that you give. And so he says, go call your husband. In that moment, as we read that, we can feel the pause. There's a little awkwardness again back in the conversation. Why? Because it just got personal. Anytime that we have to deal with something that's personal, what do? We hesitate because we don't always want to tell. We don't always want to deal with that because sometimes it's not always attractive. Or sometimes we're concerned about how is this going to be received. We're not talking about all of our dark secrets and skeletons in the closet and all this, but something that is a serious thing, something that is an effectual thing. This just got personal. But here's what I want us to see. This was not in the way that we assume, because that's exactly what she was concerned about. How is he going to see me now? He's talking to me now, but once I tell him what I got going on in my life, he's probably going to walk away. He's probably going to reject me. He's probably going to look at me with scorn. He's probably going to look at me as something lesser than, because that's exactly how she'd been received. That's exactly how she'd been treated. So why would he be any different? How many people do we see that is associated, again, with the title of Christian or believer or whatever, that people see exactly that? You're just one of them. Hypocrite, this, that, what. We've heard them all, right? This is exactly where her heart is at. But Jesus wasn't there to shame her or to point out the number of husbands. That was not what he was going to do. It was to show her well. This is the well that you've been drawing from. It had nothing to do with Jacob. This is your well. Man, I love that. Because when we begin to understand, what am I drawing from? Where am I drawing from? And this is so incredible. So the one that she kept looking for, the one that she kept drawing from was keeping her thirsty. It never gave her what she was looking for. Friends, it is still about meeting those in their brokenness, right? Because here's the thing. She was pursuing happiness. She was pursuing love and acceptance, all the things that we all want. Everybody wants that, right? That's what she was looking for. And like the old song would go, I still haven't found what I'm looking for. She was searching, and she was seeking this through relationships. And it just wasn't working. And so, well, this one didn't work, so the next one will. The next one's going to be the one. This is the one. This is the one. Our profiles match on eHarmony. It's got to be the one. You know, we're both a Leo or whatever. I mean, whatever the people, you know, we both got, you know, brown hair. Everything. This is it. This is the one. But before long, you're in a spiral and it gets out of control because it wasn't the one. It wasn't what I thought. It wasn't the answer. It's like the gambler. Okay, it's like the gambler that says, this is the one. This is the winning ticket. I just know it. I'm betting the house on this one. I'm going all the way with this one. Oh, man, dang it. I'm just going to try one more time. I'm going to pull that lever on that slot machine. I know it's my last $5, but I got a feeling. This is the one. It's going to happen. Oh, man. But my ship's coming in one day, only to realize it was the Titanic. You know, a lot of people fight this spiral effect and what's going on. And before long, all the sure things leave. And they leave you broken and bitter and alone. In other words, the well ran dry and the thirst was never quenched. That is the lesson that he's trying to get her to see, is where you're heading is not going to get you there. What you're trying to do is not going to work. It's not that you're wrong in your pursuit of wanting to be loved and accepted and taken care of, but you're looking in all the wrong places. You know, how many people do that? All the time, not just relationally, but in every kind of way. Work and the pursuit of fame or the pursuit of notoriety or pursuit of wealth. We travel down so many different roads, and what he's trying to say is just go with me. Just go with me and I'll show you what you need. This was the lesson Jesus needed her to see. This was why he talked to her. It was not about just making bad choices, but rather these choices will never answer your questions. They will never fulfill your needs. They will never quench your thirst. What he was telling her was, only I can do that. Only I. That's what we need people to see today. Only Jesus can answer those things. Only Jesus can answer that. So she responded. She said, I don't have a husband. Now, this represents, okay, I want you to look at that. She said, I don't have a husband. That word matters, that one little letter, A, because that represents the singular, but it also represents the current. So I've not had just one, and I don't have one now. All right. See, I don't know if my picture's up there or not. Very interesting picture, but I created this picture. You see the 5 prevalent guys and 1 in the faint, and that represents, you see that, if you can see that picture up there. But anyhow, what we find here is they're dealing with the issue that's at hand. And she said, I don't have a husband. And Jesus said, what you have said is correct. So you're dealing with the issue. You're not dodging it. You're not, okay. In other words, okay, now that's out of the way. Now we can get busy. Because that was the weight that she was carrying. That was the thing she was so concerned about, how he would receive that. What would he say? What would he think? Based on all the things that she had heard, all the things that she had been told. And so he's like, okay, now that's out of the way. Now we can get somewhere. Now I can help you because you see the issue. See, they went on and talked a little bit longer, and he gave her the truth, and she listened, which is the desire of every teacher, that people would listen to what you're saying, right? That is the desire of every teacher, and she did. And then she spoke of her knowledge of the Messiah, the one that is going to come, and how things are all going to be better when that happens. And he'll explain everything. I want you to get this image in your mind. And Jesus kind of heard that. And he leaned in just a little bit and got a little closer to her and said, yeah, that's me. That's me. Can we imagine what that moment was like? Can we imagine? Because here this conversation that started off a little weird, a little awkward, has now moved to a revelation. We can only imagine the stunned look that tells us the disciples arrived, and we read they were amazed, but it tells us they said nothing. What were they amazed about? Were they amazed that the Jew was talking to a Samaritan? Were they amazed that a woman and a man were talking? Or were they amazed at the fact that Jesus truly does care about everybody? What were they? Because they didn't always get that. They were oftentimes like, man, I ain't got time to mess with them. But Jesus really cares. He's sitting down talking to somebody that society says you can't talk to, that's clearly got some issues, whatever, but he's talking to her. We're not told exactly what they were amazed about, but what we see next is awesome. It tells us she left her water jar, not out of anger, not out of embarrassment or disgust, or not out of hurt feelings. No, she left her water jar to go tell somebody else. She was so excited about being set free. She was so excited about what God had told her, what he had shown her. You matter. She wanted everybody to know. Shouldn't that still be what we do today as believers? Shouldn't that still be our heart and passion, that we want everybody to know? And it says that she went and told others. The joy of meeting Jesus and the change that he brought to her was worth sharing. I still think it is. I still think it is. We read that she left the water jar and she went to town. Where was town? Samaria. Remember verse 4? Jesus had to go where? Samaria. But listen to this, friends. He didn't go to town. She took him with her. Jesus didn't go. She took him. Man, I love that. Because that's the beauty of what happened here. I need to go through Samaria. He went through there through her. You see how that ties together? Oh man, what a great message, right? So we see something incredible here. And she told him, she said, come and see a man who told me everything. Think about that. Somebody just told me everything that I've ever done. He knew it all. We think on the surface, man, that'd be a little embarrassing. But what she was saying through this is, whew, man, I'm relieved. My chains are gone. I've been set free. It's off. I don't have to worry about that anymore because it's been taken care of. That's what meeting Jesus is all about. It's taking all that old junk off. Okay? It's letting us be able to realize we can draw from the living water. And she said to those that were listening, could this be the Messiah? Could this be the very one that we've been waiting for? Is this the time? And we read, then they left town after hearing her. And then look, they made their way to him. They went to him, seeking to save him. What does that look like? Right there. One life change ended up a chain of events, and more lives were changed. And indeed, Jesus had to go through Samaria, and that's exactly what he did through her. I love this story. It is so incredible. He had to go, not just for her, friends, but to reach Samaria through her. We've oftentimes missed that point because we only see her story. There's so much more here. So we read in verse 39, it says, many Samaritans from the town, the place he had to go, believed in him because, so the reason for, the why, the how it came to be, because of what the woman said. So did the way that Jesus met her and spoke to her and treated her, did it matter? Absolutely. 1,000,000%. Because of that, other people were affected. Had it been the other way, had it been a negative experience, or I don't want anything to do with that experience, guess what? Samaria wouldn't have heard a word. That's the beauty of the lesson being taught here. How we do it absolutely matters. And so as a result, she changed, she told others, they changed, a community changed. Seeking and saving is a beautiful thing when it is understood. That is the wonderful part about this. So we read, it says, they asked him to stay. They wanted more. They wanted more. And I love the final part. It says, they told this woman, the one from the well, We no longer just believe because of what you said, but now since we've met Jesus, we know he is the Savior of the world. You see the personal encounter there? We met him. It ain't just what you told me, now I know. Now I know because I've had that experience. I've had that encounter. Now that I know that it is real. How incredible is that? Knowing him, understanding him, meeting him, friends, it changes everything. So as we wrap this up, he may have to meet you at your well today. Maybe that's important to you. Maybe right now he needs to meet you at your well. But here's the challenge. Will you leave your water jar and run into town and tell somebody else? Will you leave what he takes from you and leave it there and say, I don't need it back? It's not that important. You've been set free. That is so important, friends. He says, whosoever. There's no exceptions to that. Whoever drinks, that means willingly, from this water will never thirst again. May you never read this story the same way again. May you realize the freedom that comes through letting him meet you at your well.